this book is, I like a bit of history, and I know a little bit about the Second World War, and I had never heard of Sefton Delmer, but I guess most people haven't. But do you want to tell us about how did you become aware of him, or what made you want to write a book about Sefton Delmer?
Well, I'd already written a couple of books about contemporary propaganda. And then literally one of these meetings that you have, one of these sort of like think tank meetings or university meetings, someone said, well, look, we're all complaining about, the Russians and the Iranians and the Chinese and the far right using disinformation. Actually, we were very good at it ourselves in the Second World War. And told me about Sefton Delmer. And I hadn't heard of him either. And I kind of just love the sound of his name, Sefton Delmer. There's something sort of intriguing about it. And I started to read up about him, that there is a group of dedicated sort of historians and archivists who've been looking at his work in World War II, which has been declassified slowly, because this was sort of written secret war to undermine Nazi propaganda. And then he wrote some memoirs in the 60s were out of print. And I started reading those. And he was, at first glance, doing this spectacular disinformation campaign, sort of creating these, actually dozens of fake radio stations that sounded as if they were Nazi, but weren't. They were being run out of Bedfordshire. And they'd sort of go, hi, we're Nazis. But that Goebbels, he's a bad un. A bit like, the Russians create sort of fake American accounts that pretend to be American Twitter accounts and are actually Russians, and putting all the stuff the Russians need there. So that was amusing. And kind of bracing to realize that, disinformation is nothing new. But the reason I decided to write the book was when I realized that actually he was doing something way cleverer. And actually what he was doing was thinking very, very deeply about what makes authoritarian propaganda attractive and how you can subvert it. But no, he taps into some really dark feelings as well, like envy and bitterness. But he does something very different with them than what the Nazis do. But no, he's like, I think, the story here is if you want to really, really, go to the places that authoritarian propaganda is trying to dominate, you're going to go to some very, very dark places in the human psyche.
Yeah. There's various interesting tactics there's a lot of using pornography with this, some surviving remnants of this. Not everything was recorded, obviously, so some of it's we
have the transcripts.
Right,
this is also one of the wow moments for me when I realized we don't have the recording, sadly, or very few, unless somebody now, which happens after you do a book, it's like, oh, actually, I've had the recordings in my basement the whole time. But as far as we know, there's hardly any recordings. But we do have the transcripts. Now, we have the transcripts because the good people at the US State Department were faithfully transcribing the shows, the early ones, thinking they were genuine Nazi shows. And they were like, we wonder what this strange pornography is coming from Germany. And it's like, so we actually have the transcripts, which are here in Washington, most of them at the archives, College Park. And they make for some pretty intense porn. There is a lot of pretty intense porn. Delmer was not holding back. Okay.
Can you get? I'm happy for you to give us any examples.
Well, there was one that he got into a lot of trouble with because he got nearly sacked for this. It involved, I think, a German admiral, some sailors, some ladies of the night, a helmet, a German, pickle helmet with a spike on it, and a lot of butter, and an orgy. And the helmet went into all sorts of places in the orgy. And it was meant to show corruption of the Nazi elites. They were using butter, which was rationed for their for their various types of penetration. And that got into lots of trouble. Actually, that caused such, that made one of the senior officials in Churchill's government, Stafford Cripps, who was a teetotaling Christian Marxist, he was so appalled by this that he wanted Delmer sacked. Which he was convinced that this was very necessary to the war effort.